Hi everyone, it's Christopher, aka the Tattooed Quilter, and I'm so thrilled to be here at Fat Quarter Shop to bring you a really fun house project. Now, this project is a table runner, so you can use it in your home, and it's so cute and a lot of fun. And guess what? There's a secret behind this. It's foundation paper pieced, because who doesn't love perfect flying geese? Now, don't get nervous if you haven't done foundation paper piecing before. I'm going to walk you through it. It's super easy and a lot of fun. And you know what? You're going to make your own foundation paper piecing templates. This flying geese table runner is so cute and is so perfect for a little book get together, a little book club get together, or a little dinner party, or you're having your girlfriends over for some tea and some snacks. Let's get started and make this table runner. All right, so let's go through and look at the materials we're going to need for this flying geese table runner. First, you're going to need your Easy Trace light box. Now, this light box is by Lori Holt of Bee in My Bonnet, and I love it. It's a great shape, it's easy to work with, and this is how you're going to put your foundation paper piece blocks together. You're also going to need a tablet. So your tablet, I'm using a drawing tablet here because I like the weight of the paper. It has and this is an 80-pound paper, and it's an 11 by 14 shape because our blocks are finishing at 10 inches. So you want to make sure you have enough room for your foundation paper piece blocks. We're also using the Creative Grids Perfect 10 ruler. This is how we're going to create our flying geese blocks. We're using 50 weight Aurifil thread, and this is 2021, just a white thread. You can use a neutral, or you can use one that matches your project. It's totally up to you. We're also using a 90-14 sewing needle. I like to use 90-14 when I do paper piecing. It's just the right amount of hole for the thread to go through without messing up the paper. We also have a pencil so that we can trace out our foundation paper pieced templates. And then we have our fabric as well. I'm using a bunch of fabrics to give it sort of a mix match look. It's totally up to you. You can do whatever you want to do. But I just love this palette. It has a really shabby chic feel to it. It's really adorable. I'm using Blossom, which is my basic for Riley Blake designs. We also have Riley Blake's basic Kisses in here. We also have Love Story from Webster's Pages. I love this rose. It's so pretty. And then we have Lori Holt's Shabby in here, which is a great basic, and I love this. I love the mix of this with Blossom. All right, so now we have our supplies. Now here comes the fun part. We're actually going to make our foundation paper piece templates. Don't worry, it's really easy. I'm going to walk you through it. Foundation paper piecing has been around for a very long time. There's a lot of really great resources online. There's lots of great books. There's lots of people selling patterns, but I like to make my own. And guess what? You can make your own too. And this is where the fun part comes in. So this is where our tablet and our ruler comes in, because we're going to make our own foundation paper piece block. So you're going to take a piece of paper out of your drawing tablet, and we're going to take our Perfect 10 ruler, and we're going to place this on our paper. And you can place it anywhere on the paper. Remember, you want to leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance around it, so you don't want to go right up against the edge, because then you're going to be in trouble. And I'm using 10 inches because that was the block that I felt like was the right size for the table runner. You can go smaller if you want. You can use 8 inches or 5 inches. That's kind of the fun thing about making your own templates. All right, so we're going to draw our outside border first. And we're just using a pencil. You can use a pen too. I think sometimes pencil, people get nervous that it's going to get on the fabric. But it's totally up to you. I haven't had any issues using a pencil. And also I can erase with a pencil. And we're just following the edges of our ruler to create our outside border for 10 inches. And then I like to come in and mark 5 inches, because that's the half point, because you're going to get 2 flying geese out of this one 10-inch block. So just mark where 5 is, because we have to connect all of our points. Okay, great. So there you can see that we have our outside border. And we've marked where our 5-inch marks are at for our half flying geese. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take your ruler, and you're going to line up 5 inches, because we know that's our half point for our flying geese. And then you're just going to draw a line right down the middle. And again, you want to mark the half point, so 5 inches. And if you did 8, then obviously your half point would be 4, and etc. Now we have to create our flying geese shapes, right? So the trick with foundation paper piecing is most of your lines that you're sewing on, because you're really sewing on the line. It's kind of sew with color paper, sew, something. Anyway, so your lines have to go off of your page almost, or else a line in the middle would be floating there and it doesn't really connect anything. So our halfway point is 5, and we're just going to draw this line down here. So there's one of our flying geese wings. I like to call them wings. And then you turn it around, do the other side. Okay, so there you can see the start of our flying geese block. And I go ahead and start this process numbering, because numbering is important with foundation paper piecing. It's the order in which you sew. So, so 1 would be the first block that we would lay down, our fabric that we would lay down, 2, 3. And that just reminds me of the order that we're going to be sewing in. And then we have to do our next block. And you're just doing the same that you did before. And then because this is 1, 2, and 3, and this is all one block, this is now going to be number 4, 5, and 6. Easy peasy. The other trick that you can do is, once you have your fabric choices picked out and you kind of know what order you want to put your fabric in, you could go in and say, you know, this is the rose print, this is blossom, and you could add, you know, the colors to it. It's totally up to you to help you remember. A lot of times I'll lay the fabric out and then I'll take a photo of it on my phone, and then I'll refer back to my phone. Just a little trick that I like. One thing you notice that we don't see is our 1/4 inch seam allowances. And that's okay, because you're actually going to be adding those in as we sew along. You're also not seeing an outside 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to add that in at the very end with our cutting. All right, so now that we have our template drawn out, we're ready to go and start our sewing process. So now that you have your template all ready to go, you have it all numbered, drawn out, ready to go, now comes the fun part of actually sewing it down. So this is where we use our light board, and you're going to flip the side that you traced down, face down on the light board. And this is, again, we're using the Easy Trace light board here. You could also hold this up to your dining room table light if you wanted to, but I love using a light board because I can actually see the lines through it. Sometimes the fabric makes it a little hard to see the lines, but we're using pretty light fabrics here. And remember, we're starting with number 1. So you take your number 1 fabric and you lay it over your foundation paper piece template, and you've cut the fabric big enough to where it covers all of your seam allowances, and those are in the instructions with the pattern. And because this is a pretty big piece, especially if this is your first time doing it, I like to just kind of pin it in place. That way it doesn't shift on you. And then flip it over, and you can see that you're covered all the way around. You have enough for your seam allowances, and you're going to take it to your machine. Oh wait, we have to add our second fabric to it. Whoopsie daisy. So we got to add number 2 because we have to have something to sew to this. I mean, goodness gracious. Okay. So we'll take our second fabric, and this is right sides together. So your first fabric is right side up, your second fabric is right side down. And you're just going to overlap where 1 and 2 meet, because we're sewing on this line here. So you want to make sure you overlap 1/4 inch, and that's where you're adding in your seam allowances. That looks pretty good to me. Sometimes I like to flip it over just to make sure. That looks pretty good. You can see there we have enough for our seam allowances. And then we pick all this up together and we take it to our machine. Now on the sewing machine, I preset this to have a short stitch length. So I like around a 1.4 stitch length. And the reason why you do a smaller stitch length is it's easier to tear the paper at the end. We're also using our 9014 needle, and we have Aurifil thread in there. And then let me back up a little bit. I like to start and stop 1/4 inch off of the lines. That way when I go to cut it, the thread doesn't just pop out. I think this is ready. Okay. And all you're doing is following the line that you drew for your template. And then we're getting close to the end. And again, we want to sew a 1/4 inch off. Okay. So now you're going to remove your pin. And you're going to flip this up with the line side facing you. And on the line that you sewed, you're going to flip your paper over up against that line. And you're just going to crease it. Then you're going to take your ruler and you're going to add in that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Right up against the edge of where you sewed. Okay. And you can see there, you can see that 1/4 inch seam allowance. So just take your rotary cutter and cut off the excess fabric. And then I throw away a little tiny scrap, but a bigger scrap like this I would use because a lot of times in foundation paper piecing, this scrap could work for a smaller little project. You could even use this for EPP. So we'll save that guy. Okay. There you see our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And look at that. You did your first foundation paper piece line. And we're just going to press this back. And my iron, I'm using no steam because steam on paper will make it wrinkle and it'll just be kind of a hot mess. Trust me, I've done it. Okay, now once you have this all nice and flat, we're going to add our 3rd piece. Looks pretty good. Okay, bring our light board back. So we have piece 1, piece 2. Now we have to sew piece 3. And piece 3 is this other side here. So you take your piece 3 fabric, again, right sides down or right sides facing, because remember this is right side up. And you're going to overlap it a 1/4 inch. And see, sometimes even with the light board it's a little difficult to see. That's why I just kind of pull back and give myself a little bit of a check. Okay. And if you're super nervous about this shifting at all, you can go back in and add your pin in. Once you kind of get going and get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. Okay, and I'm just going to give myself a little check here. You can see all of my seam allowances are covered. And let's take this to the machine. Again, we're going to start and stop a 1/4 inch off. And then you're just sewing right on that line. Easy peasy. And sometimes I like to give myself a little mental check to make sure I'm not catching any fabrics. No fabrics have folded under there, especially with these large pieces. You could catch it. Stop a 1/4 inch off, cut our threads, and then remove our pin. And you can see here's piece number 3. So we're going to repeat the same process. You're going to flip this over, make sure everything's nice and flat under there. Pull that paper back, and you'll see here it's sort of bunching. And that's okay. That's totally fine because your intersection of your stitches has created that little bunch. All you're going to do is pop those stitches away from the paper. Don't worry, you're not messing anything up. Okay, everything's nice and flat. So again, take our ruler, add our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Save this big piece for another project. Throw away our scraps. And then take this to our iron, and we're going to press this back. Oh my goodness, I'm getting so excited. The reveal is the fun part. Goodness gracious, this looks so good. Okay. So now we have to add piece number 4. So piece number 4 is our next flying geese section. This is a big section. I love this rose print. Right sides down, making sure we have enough for our seam allowance. Again, if you feel uncomfortable, you can pin it in place. You also notice there's a lot of excess fabric here. Some people say in foundation paper piecing you're wasting a lot of fabric. I just love the precision you get with foundation paper piecing. You could always go in, and another little trick here is if you feel like this is a lot of fabric, you can come in and just trim this, making sure you don't trim super close to the paper because you don't want to lose your seam allowance. We'll save those scraps for another project. And we're all set to add that next piece, so we'll go back to the machine here. Start and stop 1/4 inch off, making sure everything's still nice and flat under there. And this is where you start to get that precision because that point isn't going to disappear because we're sewing on the line. Stop 1/4 inch off. Come over here to our cutting mat, and then same process as before. You're just going to flip this back up against the line that you sewed. Pop your stitches out. Everything's nice and flat. Then we're going to add in our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Save our big pieces for other projects. Take this back to our iron to press it back. And you can really see that point there. You're not losing that point at all. And that's what I love about foundation paper piecing. I'm just gonna roll this back and give it a good press. All right, we have to finish with our last 2 pieces. So 5 and 6. Okay. Again, 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure you have that line there covered. You can pin it in place if you need to. Flip it over, give yourself a little check. Looks pretty good. Take it to your machine. And once you get the hang of this, you can speed up your stitches on your machine. Because again, you're just following that line that you've drawn. Stopping 1/4 inch off. Okay, take it to our cutting mat. Flip it back like we've done with our other pieces. Pop our stitches.
You could pause for a second.
Okay, so we've added our last block, our 6th block. Now comes the fun part of adding the 1/4 inch seam allowance around the outside border. You're just going to take your ruler, and similar to what you did when you were piecing the block, you're just adding that 1/4 inch. So we're going to follow that outside border, 1/4 inch, and just trim away. Rotate and trim. And of course, if you feel more comfortable, you could draw your outside border, your outside 1/4 inch border. But I like this method better because I think it's more precise. All right. Ta-da! There we have it. Your flying geese block. There's 2 in this block. It finishes at 10 inches. It's 10.5 inches with your seam allowances. And you need to make 3 for this project. All right, so you're saying to yourself, all right, I've made this, but there's paper on the back of it. Well, now you get to remove the paper. I like to go in the order of how I stitched it, and all you're doing is flipping the paper over, and similar to what you do with your checkbook, when you would tear out a check, you just remove it by pulling it away. This is a really fun project you could do with your grandkids or your kids. You could give them all of your little templates and they could tear out the paper for you. Some people like to leave the paper in when they're sewing. I don't. I like to remove the paper prior to joining the blocks together, especially on giant blocks like this Flying Geese block. Number 3. Number 2. You could also use some tweezers if you needed to, like if sometimes the paper gets a little stuck, you can use tweezers. There we go. And then our last one, and this one should come off pretty easy. Look at that. And there we go. There's our Flying Geese block. So now you're going to make 2 more of these so that we can join them together to make our table runner. So cute. Okay, so you've made your 3 blocks for your Flying Geese table runner. Then the last step of putting it all together is really just joining your blocks together. And all you do is take your block. You can pin it together if you want. And you're just sewing down the seam right here, 1/4 of an inch. That's easy. All you need to do. Then you're going to quilt it and bind it. And you know what? I have one right here all done. Ta-da! Isn't this so cute and so much fun and so easy, right? I hope that takes the pressure off of foundation paper piecing, and I hope you'll see how much fun it is to do, especially when you're doing your own templates. Now, I love the Flying Geese block, but you could also make your own template for log cabin or half square triangle. It's a lot of fun. Well, I hope you enjoyed our Flying Geese table runner video today, and you can follow me at the Tattooed Quilter on Instagram or check out my website. You can also catch another video on tablescapes because I love a good tablescape. And I'm going to show you how to put one together with this table runner. If you're making this table runner at home, please tag me in your photos. I would love to see how it turned out.